to be $114.64 to the typical property within the town of Wallkill. Notice is also hereby given pursuant to Article 8 of the Environmental Conservation Law, SECR, and its implementing regulations contained in New York Codes, Rules, and Regulations, Part 617, that the town board of the town of Wallkill has determined that the proposed action is classified as unlisted and that it should act as lead agency for purposes of SECR review. We will be conducting said SECR review during the public hearing referenced herein. For additional information related to SECR review of this proposed action, please contact Louisa Gracia, Town Clerk. Any resident of the town of Wallkill is entitled to be heard upon said proposed ambulance district formation at the public hearing. Copies of the order calling for the public hearing, other documentation related hereto are available for review at Wallkill Town Hall, 99 Tower Drive, Building 1. The town of Wallkill make every effort to ensure that the hearing is accessible to persons with disabilities. Anyone requiring special assistance and or reasonable accommodations should contact the town clerk. By order of the town board of the town of Wallkill, Louisa Gracia, Town Clerk.
Supervisor and board and members of the public, I'll note that the public hearing notice was posted and published in accordance with law. Before everyone gets started with the public hearing portion, I will note that a short environmental assessment form has been provided to the board and to the town clerk with the proposed findings that there will be no adverse environmental impacts found and associated with the formation of the district. There's really no adverse environmental impacts to be associated with it. Once we get around to the board considering issuing an order, the board wishes to establish the ambulance district, there will be findings within that order, which I've already provided to the board with respect to SECR. So at this point, no reason not to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Now we're going to have a presentation on Town of Wallkill EMS by Alexandra, the director.
So first I want to start with public speaking gives me anxiety. So we're all going to stutter through this together. I apologize in advance. And I see a lot of EMS and fire personnel here. So the first several slides here are going to be a reminder of what we all do every day. My name is Alexandria. I'm the executive director of the Town of Wallkill EMS. And I like to tell my providers that I'm just a paramedic who works here because our agency is so much more than its leadership. It's the result of the dedication and passion of each one of our providers. Something that you'll see during this presentation is that the providers who work for the Town of Wallkill EMS are here because of their commitment to the community. They could make the same amount of money or probably even more doing a lot less work at a municipality not very far from here, but they remain in our municipality because they serve our community and the good that our organization is doing. When we go over the data, you might think to yourself, they're doing fine, like what are we doing here? But I'm here to talk about what's going on before things fully go off the rails. Morally, I have an obligation to be here and talk about the future of this town's emergency services if there's not rapid intervention. This is something that I've been working on for years, and I'm really happy to see you all here tonight. So just a little bit of background. In 1972, we were founded under the name Fair Oaks Volunteer Ambulance Corps. Today, we still have 2 founding members on our board of directors, and there's actually 2 founding members on Zoom right now with us. In 2014, we upgraded to provide ALS services. We'll touch base on what that means on the next slide. Around this time, we also began to transition to being a fully paid service. In 2021, we filed the DBA with the state to operate under Town of Wallkill Emergency Medical Services to reflect our fully career staff. In 2023, we officially saw the turning point of COVID. Supplemental COVID funding sources dissipated, and we began to shift to a new normal post-COVID. In 2024, we put new ambulances into service that had been ordered in 2021, believe it or not, and began to offer additional services to the town to meet growing needs. In 2025, today, we find ourselves overextending to cover the gaps in service in the community. So to understand the spectrum of pre-hospital care, and just to talk about some of the definitions you'll hear in this presentation, I find myself deeply ingrained in this, and I know that there's a lot of jargon in this industry. So basic life support would be EMTs. They provide a basic level of care. You need about 4 months of part-time education to become an EMT. The skills performed include all of that of a CFR, like CPR, AED, administering Narcan, providing oxygen. EMTs can also administer aspirin, stop the bleed, and basic trauma care. They also offer rapid transport to the hospital for more definitive care. ALS, which is paramedics, they have about 18 months of school. You have to be an EMT to be a paramedic. You can't just like jump and be a paramedic. And the skills performed there include giving a range of medications, starting IVs, advanced airway management like intubation and heart monitoring. And then paramedics can treat more serious medical problems like strokes, heart attacks, major trauma. They still also transport patients to the hospital. So some differences here between ambulances and fly cars is in the same vein. Ambulances are staffed by EMTs or paramedics. New York State requires at least one credentialed provider on an ambulance. In our department, we don't have any drivers, so we have a minimum of 2 credentialed providers on any ambulance. Sometimes it's an EMT, sometimes it's a paramedic, sometimes 2 EMTs, sometimes 2 paramedics, just kind of depends. And all of our ambulances carry the New York State required equipment as per Part 800 and supplies, and it also is a stretcher to get people to the hospital. The differentiation here with fly car is it's typically an SUV or a sedan, and it's used as a first response or intercept vehicle. There's usually only one credentialed provider on this vehicle, and our agency would be a paramedic, so either a line paramedic or a supervisor. Still contains all of the New York State required equipment and supplies, but it cannot transport patients to the hospital. No matter what, no matter how serious the injury is, there's no transporting in the backseat. Fly cars can bring additional resources to the scene, and they can also provide first response when an ambulance is unavailable. So to back up and talk about 911 calls, just so that we're all on the same page for the rest of this presentation. And this is a simplified version for the dispatchers in this room. Please do not come for me. I know I'm simplifying this, but when a person calls 911, their call is answered by the Orange County Emergency Services Dispatch Center. A call taker is going to determine the nature of the call. For the purposes of this explanation, we're going to say it's a medical call. The call is then EMD'd, which is an international standard for emergency medical dispatch. This helps the dispatcher know what kind of call, what kind of resources to send, and what the level of service will be. Based on the location of the call, the appropriate jurisdiction is dispatched or is alerted at this point. So we'll assume that this call is in the town of Walkville. Based on the call type and level of service, the tones are going to go off in our station, and then it's going to alert the crews also on every device inside the town of Walkville EMS department. So any phones we have, tablets, things like that. So no matter where the providers are, they'll know that the call has happened, even if they're not in our station, which is also horrifically loud. I'm sorry to all my providers. In our agency, based on the time of day, we will send a BLS unit to lower acuity calls, which is coded in this county as an Alpha or Bravo call, and ALS to higher acuity like a Charlie or a Delta. If an ALS unit is not available and a BLS would respond, and any available paramedic in the building would go. I'm a paramedic. Joshua, who I think is somewhere in this room, he's also a paramedic. So even though we're administrators, we both still have that capacity to join the BLS crew if needed, or a supervisor, you know, whoever's around. And at this time, the unit would go en route to the call and continue to update the dispatchers at Orange County 911 until the unit was clear. If a unit was not available, this is when the mutual aid system would be activated. To be clear, the reason that we might not be available with an ambulance is that our other units are on the job. We are in service 24/7, 365, whether or not it's myself who is to get on the ambulance or Josh. We are always in service, but we can only respond with the number of ambulances we have staffed at any given time. So after 2 minutes of no response from our agency would be resounded, and our mutual aid partner would be simultaneously dispatched. Every county or every agency in this county has something on file with the county that tells them, okay, if Walkville's not available and this is the time, this is who's gonna go. Am I going crazy?
He's trying.
Oh, okay, sorry. So then this is who would be sounded to go to that call. So at 2 minutes, I get resounded and my mutual aid partners get resounded, like Pine Bush might get, you know, sounded to go out for mutual aid. So this change happened last year, and it decreases the amount of time it takes mutual aid resources and to get there, and also gives our units a chance to maybe become available because they've left the hospital and now they're available to respond. It would still be faster for one of our units clearing the hospital to cover a job in our town than it would be for a mutual aid partner to, you know, go across the county to come into our municipality. You might have questions about this, and I'm happy to talk about it after. So right now, this is our agency and how we're making it all happen. And I see my title did not get there, so please forgive me. But currently we have 5 ambulances, 4 fly cars. We have 15 EMTs and 23 paramedics, which includes myself and Josh, who double as supervisor. I couldn't find a better way to present this, but basically what I'm trying to show here is what our current coverage is So we currently have one 24-hour ALS unit. We have an additional.
This meeting is being recorded.
We have an additional supplemental 12-hour ALS unit, which is the second one from 12 to 12 that you'll see. We have a BLS supplemental unit that goes from 7 AM to 7 PM. The reason for these unit times is we looked at our call volume, we looked at the dropped calls, we looked at the calls coming in, and this is what we could do to best fit that need. If I could predict 911 calls, I wouldn't be here because somebody out there would be paying me a lot of money to run their municipality. But for now, this is the best that we could come up with our resources. In addition to that, we have a fly car that runs 7 days a week from 11 AM to 7 PM. And a supervisor fly car, again, a paramedic that runs from 10 AM to 10 PM. So this right here is what's covering the 7,500 calls in this municipality. It is hard, it is painful, and this is why we don't have a lot of staff. Not shown on here is the fact that Josh and I both have fly cars, so in the event that there's an emergency overnight, an MCI, calls for distress, something like that, we're able to respond in an official capacity and also backfill units when it's during the week and we're in the office working. So this is not just a town of Walkhill problem, like EMS is in crisis, because I'm sure you want to know why we're here, why we're talking about this. Ambulance bills are so much money. How are we not sitting on a pile of cash? But like, honestly, I'm really happy that that's what you're thinking of, because this is a soapbox that I could talk about for hours. And if I'm not careful, we're not going to be changing slides and we'll still be here tomorrow and I'll still be yapping about this. So since 2019, 16.67% of the EMS departments in the state have closed, like no longer open, no longer responding. They have closed their credentials with the state of New York. This is based on the state of New York's website. The Department of Health allows you to see who's active in the state at any given time. So from 2019 to 2024, we lost more than 15% of the agencies in this state because we just can't figure out what the problem is and how to solve it. Costs are rapidly rising. So just like eggs, the cost of medical supplies and equipment are skyrocketing. We've seen more than 100% increase in some of our supplies since COVID. Our equipment cost increases honestly is something that keeps me up at night. A stretcher system that pre-COVID was around $40,000 is now above $65,000, and that doesn't include the $12,000 of annual maintenance that's required per stretcher. No piece of medical equipment or supply is safe from these increases. And sometimes, honestly, our supplies expire before we use them, but we still have to have them just in case you need them. It also might surprise you to hear this, but EMS is not an essential service. So this does vary from state to state, but in the state of New York, it's not deemed essential. So every year there's talk about changing this. You might have heard it in the budget this year. It got a little louder than it has in the past, but still nothing has changed. It's difficult to come up with a way to, like a palatable solution to make this jump for communities. While I know the town of Walkhill sees our service as essential, the largest problem is that without a municipal requirement to provide the services, there's no set funding source. So grants are limited as a result and budgets are tight. It's hard for municipalities to make this decision. There's also discrepancies in the payment model. While we're required to respond when dispatched, there's no requirement to pay for our services. The amount of money we receive per call is 100% based on the rules of an insurance company. I'll touch base on our obligations in the next slide, but only a portion of our responses are even eligible for reimbursement, and even then, payment's not guaranteed. Our payments are based on the rules of an insurance plan, allowances, and those subsequent deductibles. We don't decide how much a patient's getting billed. That's 100% decided by the EOB provided by the insurance company. In New York State, the way that the law is written is usual and customary. So insurance companies have to pay an EMS agency what's usual and customary. But the best part about that is the person who decides what's usual and customary is the insurance company. We don't have any say, we don't have any seat at that table. Doesn't matter what our costs are. Every once in a while, Medicare demands that we give them a bunch of data to tell them that we need more money. It's hundreds of administrative hours for the year, and we're required to do it. Otherwise, they'll charge us money if we don't give them the information. But it doesn't change anything. Nothing changes. Our reimbursement rates are not increasing. In fact, in New York State, you get more money if you tow a car and you have a contract with the state than if you provide ambulance service and they have Medicare. So like, it doesn't seem to matter, right? So on average, right now, we recoup $275 per transported Medicaid patient. So that's only if they call, we show up, they get service, they agree to go to the hospital, and we get everything required for billing. So it's signatures, that's insurance information, that's their social security number. I don't know about you, but most people don't want to give out their social security number, let alone sign something. They don't want to do any of this. If I don't get all of those things within 45 days of that trip, I'm not getting paid on that. So I hope that I get their $275. So it's 13% of our patients. From Medicare, which is about 48%, my average recoup is $554. same thing, I have to have signatures, or I have to have a valid reason they didn't sign. And my providers in here know that they get a lot of sendbacks when they don't give me a valid reason for not signing. So it's something, you know, that we really have to take care of. Our self-pay patients, my favorite number, we get an average of $26. So if you don't have insurance and you pay your bill, on average, and I transfer you to the hospital, on average, I'm getting paid $26. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do with $26. I mean, I'm grateful for anything, right? But like, I don't know, like a pizza's more than that. Commercial insurances, they're all over the place. It could be as much as $1,000 on average, but it's only 13% of our transported patients. So it's like hard to rely on that number and think, oh yeah, we're gonna get good money for this trip. So unlike a doctor's office, we don't pre-qualify somebody's insurance before letting them in the ambulance. It's not for weeks or months after the call if we know if we're getting paid and how much we're getting paid. And in New York State, you can't balance bills. So the only bills sent to patients are based on the rules of their insurance plan and what an insurance company says we are allowed to bill them for. Ambulance bills can't be itemized. So there's a base fee, which is based on the level of service. There's only a handful of them, and a mileage fee. So something we hear often is, you only gave me a ride to the hospital. Why is this bill so high, right? So that cost is based on the cost of readiness, which is conceptually difficult to be concise about, but I'm going to do my best. Since ambulance bills can't be itemized, I have to calculate my expected cost of all my supplies for the entire year, including my equipment, my staffing, and then I also have to understand the number of calls I think I'm going to respond to. So do that with some back of the envelope math, and that is what I need to make per call in order to pay for all of those expenses, right? So our charges are based on our anticipated recoupment of funds. Therefore, the bill a patient receives for an ambulance is based on the fact that our ambulance is available 24/7, 365 to answer their call. So no matter when the emergency came in, we were both available and ready to respond and had the appropriate equipment, supplies, and providers available to respond to that call. The cost of readiness is the reason that municipal support is so vital. It's what makes EMS agencies financially unsustainable on their own. That's why we're in crisis right now. The exclusively fee-for-service model, so only getting paid when you take somebody to the hospital, is the reason that Mobile Life Support Services is no longer an organization. So EMS is more than ambulances. Building on my last slide, I want to clarify that the relationship between the community and EMS is really complicated. EMS exists at the intersection of public health, healthcare, emergency response, and public safety. At the center of our scope is readiness and community. For years, EMS agencies were made up of local volunteers who lived and worked in the community, supporting and helping their neighbors. As time has gone on, that's become an impossible feat. People don't live in the same communities that they work in. The cost of living is really high. People are often not as connected to their communities as they once used to be. So right now, you know, we're not made up of neighbors helping neighbors anymore like we used to be. But despite this, EMS has continued to pick up community responsibilities, like helping support aging populations who might slip out of bed and not have the strength to get back into bed. This isn't a service that's reimbursable by the great majority of insurance, but it's still a call that happens frequently and requires the cost of readiness and available resources. A lot of the services that we provide aren't reimbursed by medical insurance alone. So just a year in review, and to point out another typo on my slide, under 4,169, it says service provided versus 2022, it's versus 2023. So I'm sorry about that. In 2024, we had a total of 7,462 calls for service. On a couple slides, I'll dig into the details of what that meant and where they were. We covered 56 special events. Special events would be sporting events, graduations, things like that. We added 4,169 hours of service to our schedule. In other words, we provided that many more hours of available EMS service compared to 2023. We added an additional ambulance, which is separate from the 2 ambulances that we put into service in 2024 that we received at the end of 2023. And we also added an additional 2 fly cars to our fleet, which is kind of explains how we're covering the calls that we are. In addition to more hours of service, we also added a lot to the EMS community. We helped 2,835 EMS providers with continuing education. All New York State EMS providers are required to have continuing education hours in order to recert their credentials every 3 to 4 years. And offering continuing education helps us be a standout agency when attracting new providers to our service and giving back to the community. To put this into perspective, we are by far the busiest agency in this county, by almost double the next agency in this county. No other agency in this county has seen the percentage growth that we have seen year over year. And despite this, we are one of the few EMS agencies without municipal support in this county. So we're a community-based EMS organization that wants to serve the community. Our organization strives to be more than just an ambulance agency that responds when 911 is called. Of course, we want to be there for that as well. But we really strive to be an active member of the community who gives back in every possible way. Some of the photos here, you can see we did CPR class in the Middletown High School. So there's some pictures with somebody who previously went to that school, and they're happy to see her back. So community-based provider. In the next one, we were there talking to high school students about potential career opportunities and, you know, how they could give back to their community. We have Office for the Aging. We helped raise supplies for seniors around the Christmas time as well. More of giving back to the community. Whenever there's a town event, we try to be there, whether it's the Christmas parade or Halloween or any interactions we have, whether it's teaching the nurses in the high school system CPR or whatever it is that, you know, we can celebrate. We try to be, you know, active members of the community. I feel like I recognize some of you from other town meetings and community meetings. So this is, you know, this is the place that we want to be. So all the numbers, the fun part, right? These are times by award in 2024. So I want to take a minute to acknowledge a couple of things. This data is incredibly manual. There's nowhere I can go to just get this data. So we manually enter this data into an Excel spreadsheet. That's for 2024, it's more than 7,000 lines just to, you know, put everything in, let alone the comparisons and all the calculations to get all of this data. So in order to determine the calls by ward, we had to look at every single call individually, search the address on a map, and manually figure out what ward it's in, document it on our spreadsheet, so we could have a conversation tonight about where we are, what we're doing, and how fast we're getting there. So when looking at this data, it is really important to compare apples to apples. There's a lot of different ways to define response time. We chose to give the widest range for definition, which means our response time is from at the time dispatched to time arrived at. So not the time that our unit called en route to dispatch, but the time that we were told there was a call. So that's like the widest range that you can get for response time. So we're really trying not to cheat the numbers here, we're trying to be as transparent as possible. And these also include the lowest acuity calls. So the lowest acuity call would not warrant lights and sirens. So driving normal traffic patterns, normal speeds, respecting lights, stop signs, etc. This includes that. So it's a little bit mixed in there. To separate out lights and sirens would have taken more time than my data guy had. Thanks, Ezra. So in Ward 1, we had 877 calls, and our average response time was 9 minutes and 57 seconds. In Ward 2, we had 1,918 calls with an average response time of 7 minutes and 31 seconds. In Ward 3, we had 2,998 with an average response time of 5 minutes and 41 seconds. And in Ward 4, 513 calls with an average response time of 10 minutes and 10 seconds. So you'll notice Ward 3 seems like our favorite. It's not that it's our favorite, but both our station and Garnett, the hospital that we transport 99.9% of our patients to, are in Ward 3. So the majority of the time, our units are responding from Ward 3. So no kidding, we can get to Ward 3 the fastest, right? So that's why you kind of see a little bit of a skew of the data there. I think based on this, you'll see that like we could probably do a little bit better with our turnout time. So turnout time is from when the pagers go off in our station to the time that our unit calls en route. But that also includes when they're dispatched in the hospital and still triaging, right? So if we get paged for a call and they're still in the hospital for 5 minutes, that's averaged in with the 30 seconds it took them to get in the truck when they were in the station. So that's, you know, kind of why you're seeing a little bit of disparity there. So adding additional unit, which we'll hear about later in the presentation, I think is going to make a big difference in that average turnout time. The national standard is 60 seconds for a turnout. So that's kind of our goal and what we hope to meet by increasing our services. So there's a lot going on this slide. This is our participation. The participating providers who provide us mutual aid. So participation in the mutual aid system in New York State is required. In order to get mutual aid, we have to give mutual aid. And this slide is a breakdown of the mutual aid responses into our district. As a reminder, we use mutual aid when there's multiple calls in our district at one time. Sometimes we need mutual aid because we're just out of ambulances, and sometimes it's related to staffing, like on the overnights when you saw that there were certain hours of the day that we only had one unit in service. Right here is a breakdown of the mutual aid responses in 2024. It is not all encompassing, but it is the best that I could come up with because again, everything is wildly manual. But when you're reviewing this data, I just want to clarify that it's not another municipality's responsibility to respond to 911 calls in our district. But they do because they're participating in the mutual aid system. So these numbers are meant to show what happens to residents when we need mutual aid, not to reflect the response of other agencies. But I do want to call out the two lines in yellow. So the first one is Empress. Of the 299 requests where we requested Empress to come help us in 2024, they were unable to respond to our mutual aid request 61.5% of the time. And when they did, their turnout time, so time from dispatch to calling en route to the call, was 4 minutes and 13 seconds. And this contributed to their average response time of 17 minutes and 31 seconds, which means every time that we needed Empress, of the not 61.5% of the time that they weren't available, but the other percentage that, you know, that they were available, took them 17 minutes and 31 seconds to get to us. Even when it was a high acuity call, low acuity call, we're counting everything. So if you're on the floor having a heart attack, I hope that we have an ambulance available for you in town. In comparison, Goshen was our most fruitful mutual aid partner. They were available nearly almost always for our residents. So we should probably all thank the person from Goshen in this room. And their response time was 17 minutes and 26 seconds to a call in our district. In all fairness, they're not in our district. They are in their own district when they respond to our calls. They're not located in the center of our district to respond to our calls. And then also take note of the fact that things got so bad, not only in our town, but also in the county, that we actually used Warwick EMS 5 times last year. So I hope that you are not one of the patients that had to wait 37 minutes and 27 seconds for an ambulance, which is not to the fault of Warwick, it's to the fault of us that we even needed that help to begin with, because we have a lot of people that had to turn down that call before Warwick was the one to crew it up. So, drops calls, trying to understand the gap between demand and coverage. I'm incredibly proud of this agency and these providers, because truly the picture that I'm about to paint with this doesn't speak to the difficulties that our agency is facing. And honestly, every provider in this room is just making it look easy. Here we have drops calls in district by year starting in 2023. The first year, 2023 is really the first year that we can begin to look at data, because we really passed out of the COVID age and we're not kind of like seeing skews from COVID. So in 2023, we had 452 drops calls and an additional 25 calls that should have been dropped, but were covered by both Josh and I getting on an ambulance together. So it's 2 administrators who had other responsibilities to do, that found an available vehicle and went and responded. So I'm noting those because hypothetically, those like really should have been dropped calls if we were, you know, if neither Josh or I were providers, those would have been dropped calls. In 2024, we had 362 drops calls, which decreased due to the increase in service hours that we talked about, those 4,100 hours that we talked about earlier. But an additional 53 calls were covered by Josh and I together. So again, those would have been dropped. It's a 95.1% call coverage rate, which honestly is 95 is a good percentage to strive to. But the methods in which we're doing to get there are like almost inhumane. In 2025 so far, we've dropped 130 calls in our district. Another 30 were covered by myself and Josh. So we're at 95.4% call coverage rate. But these dropped calls are not just a number, right? These are residents that had to wait that much longer, which we saw on the previous slide, for an ambulance, even in critical situations when seconds matter. What this doesn't tell you is the number of times an administrator crewed up with another provider, or 2 fly cars went together to create an ambulance. So sometimes if somebody's sleeping in our station between calls, we'll kind of tag them and be like, hey, sorry, since you're here, you got to do this call, right? Or we might have somebody coming in to teach a CPR class. Sorry, CPR can wait, we got to go cover this call. That's not included in these numbers because we covered it and it's not covered strictly by administrators. That number would be incredibly difficult manual to figure out because we'd have to compare the schedule to people on calls, and that's not a number I could provide tonight. But it's important to understand from this that the ways we're covering calls are not sustainable, and it's honestly on the backs of our dedicated providers. If you're processing payroll, doesn't matter. There's another call in our district that needs to be covered. Don't worry though, because that payroll is still going to be waiting when you get back. In the hospital, doesn't matter. You got to figure out how to negotiate with the hospital to turn around and cover the holding calls. It's a bit of a joke in this county that when we have 4 active calls in our district, it's only 4 because this district definitely embodies the phrase when it rains, it pours. So for reference, in 2025, we were 2 times more likely to be on 2 calls at any given time than 1. So statistically, we were on 2 calls more frequently than we were just on a single call. Only 490 times in this year so far were we operating at any given time on a single call. 1,088 times, it was 2 calls. These are in-district calls for the record. 735 times, it was 3 or more calls. And at one point this year, we had 8 simultaneous calls in districts at a given moment. I don't even have 8 ambulances to give you guys. I'm not even asking for 8 ambulances. That is not the norm, but this district is in crisis, and I hope these numbers show you that. So based on all of this, some quick math, that means that nearly 82% of the time that one of our units were on call, there was another one of our units on another call. 82% of the time. That's a high volume. 64 times this year, we had 5 simultaneous calls. Today is the 133rd day in this year. This data is, stopped last week. So based on that, every other day, we've had 5 simultaneous calls or more at a given time. Every other day, this is happening in our district. As a reminder, we have 5 ambulances. So if one of my ambulances goes out of service for any reason, whether valid or an accident, right? That is a 911 call in this district that is not going to be answered. That is a town resident that is going to have to wait that much longer to receive ambulance service. And we hope it's Goshen coming, because their times looks great, but when Goshen's not available, I don't want to go back to that slide because it gives me anxiety, but it's not looking great. So I think the point here is that our ability to cover calls and what we're doing isn't sustainable, and it's also not matched anywhere else in this county because it's completely unrealistic. Our providers are working on the edge of their capacity, and we can't continue to perform at this level. So without intervention, we're going to be in a state of emergency. There's a handful of EMS administrators in this room tonight, and I can promise you that not a single one of them wants to inherit the constraints of our environment. Not a single one of them. Our units on average are doing 6 calls per shift, but I think that the stress of an emergency can't be understated. So during peak times of the day, our crews are getting restocked by supervisors who meet them on the road or at the hospital because they can't return to the station, let alone eat their food, let alone complete the required paperwork, anything like that. And this is up from an average of 4.7 calls per shift last year. So that's how much of an increase we've had from last year to this year with the same unit coverage. So I feel like you guys might want to know who's calling, because I don't use the ambulance, right? That's people's favorite thing to say to me whenever we talk about this. And this slide's a breakdown of the scene types by year, with only the top 5 most common, because I know these numbers don't add up to our call volume for the year. But by far, residents are our highest volume users, but you can see that here urgent cares are giving us a run for our money. So this is the point where I talk even more than I've already been talking, and I think I'm a little more than halfway through, so hang in there. But so far, you've been seeing metrics for an agency that has had an unprecedented ability to compensate for the increases in volume. I don't like to talk about the downfalls of our agency because it feels really personal and it feels like a personal failure to me, but I think it's important for me to pull back the curtain and show you where we're truly at as an agency. Before COVID, we, along with most agencies in this county, would see a 10% volume increase year over year. That was manageable. We could slowly scale with a 10% increase in volume. We could meet the capital demands when we only had to deal with 10% more calls every year. In 2024, we saw a 26.2% increase in total volume, which we largely attributed to the loss of a commercial provider, which was Mobile Life Services at that time, who used to cover a lot of the doctor's offices, senior living buildings. They had contracts, right? This year, so far, we've seen a 16% increase in volume. Sounds like less, it sounds like things are getting better, but our calls are not set like per day. It's not like, oh, this is how many calls we get per day, and this is how we can predict the end of the year. The summer is our busiest time. It's EMS's busiest time in the year, right? So if we're already at a 16% increase, I can without a doubt guarantee you that by summer, we will be much greater than 26.2%. And I don't have an explanation for that. We didn't lose another commercial provider. Our mutual aid partners are getting stronger and covering more of their calls. A lot of other municipalities in the area have seen the need for EMS. They're supporting them financially. I don't know why it's happening, other than we're seeing increases in our community as a whole, and that's why we're where we're at today. But we just can't wing these increases any longer. We're maximizing the use of every available resource. Everyone in our building, including administrators who run a multi-million-dollar organization, quite frankly, and even providers who are sleeping between shifts. Like anything we can do to cover these calls is what we're doing right now, but it's not sustainable. We're maxing out all of our providers, placing them under extreme stress. And it's hard to compare this industry to any other, but I'm grateful to see a lot of, police officers, firefighters in this room, and maybe some other forms of emergency medicine can compare. But when providers get a call, even if it's a low acuity call, the body is still under tremendous stress. You're still driving lights and sirens, right? You're violating traffic laws with due regard, of course, don't worry. But you're hoping that everybody around you follows those rules, you're hoping that when you clear an intersection, because you stop at every single lane and wait for everybody to stop and eye contact before you proceed, that they're gonna commit to saying stopped, right? You hope that they don't in turn just drive in front of you because they panicked and oh my God, what's happening, right? You hope that at night when you're driving, they don't just drive head on into you because the lights were so bright and they didn't know where you were, which just happened in Beacon. They hit an ambulance head on last weekend, I think. And so you hope all these things. So even if you get to the call and it's just something that maybe to you is an emergency, your body's still under stress. Like you still responded to this. You are still ready for the next call, right? Your body is still on alert because you have no idea what's coming. It's not healthy for your hormones. It's not healthy for your adrenaline. So like this readiness takes on a significant toll on the nervous system of our providers. Without adequate time between calls and time for decompression, we're losing providers to mental health difficulties brought on by the demands of our agencies. I touched on this earlier. We don't have any spare vehicles. We're maxing out our capital infrastructure and pushing beyond our means into unsustainable territory. At this point, if we had an issue, it's going to be an issue for everybody. It's not just my issue if I have an ambulance out of service. It's now your issue. It's your issue. Call 911. This year alone, I've lost 7 full-time providers. I have more than 15 shifts open weekly going out for overtime. I have administrators covering full road shifts on top of their regular duties because surprise, when you run a paid agency, people still want your process payroll and care if you were working last night. We have providers that are working 30 to 40 hours of overtime, not because they want the money. I'm sure the money is great, minus Uncle Sam's like cut, but it's because they're trying to support our agency, right? And like that's not something that people can continue to do. You cannot work those hours in a place like our organization for that long. And yesterday I worked a 21.5 hour shift covering an overnight truck and providing my regular administrative duties. And then I had to continue to wait for construction delivery because we're redoing our bathroom ourselves. And I don't have the money to pay for a vendor to do that, you know? So that's why we're here. And I think working at the town of Walk Hill EMS is for those with passion for this community, not those who want a sustainable work environment. It's embarrassing for me to stand up here and tell you what I'm putting my employees through and that I can't provide for them, but I'm here today to try to change that. No, it's not right yet. I talked to things, sorry, my brain just restarted there. So I'm here today in support of forming a district for the town to set aside dedicated funds to support EMS in this community. I want to clarify that this isn't guaranteed funding for our agency. Once a district is formed, the town is going to RFP for services, and there's a chance that a commercial provider like Empress or Ambulance will court the town for the contract. But that's like the desperate state of affairs we are in. I have to take that risk in order to provide for not only my providers, but for this community. The options are limited. No way to change that. The town board is the commissioner because they work more like a water and sewer district. So setting aside these funds is a promise and a commitment to this community. So if awarded the RFP, our agency would continue to be financially responsible. That's how we've gotten this far, and in perpetuity for providing for that need. We spent the last several years rebuilding our place in this community and displaying how far our financial responsibility can take us, but we can just no longer keep up with meeting the demands of this community and meeting the growth in this community where it's at without that financial support. So here's where you guys all get shocked. So the reason you're all here, how much money do we need and what are we going to do with it? The sum total here is $1,339,380, which would be spread across the town to provide town of Walk Hill EMS with the ability to offer a significant service increase to the community. My understanding, which I think Ms. Louisa told us a little bit earlier, is that the average homeowner in this community is expected to pay less than $115 per year, which is less than $10 per month, which is less than $32 per day. And I feel like most people don't even pick up the quarter that they drop on the ground. So just like, give it to me. I feel like that's a fair deal here. What we're getting here is an additional 24-hour ALS unit and an overnight fly car, which is staffed by a supervisor, but is also a paramedic. Additional training for our staff. So it's dedicated time for them to come in and continue to work on these skills that, you know, you guys need when you call 911. It's a contribution to a vehicle replacement fund so that we don't have vehicles that are falling apart and like flintstoning down the road. It's an increase in healthcare provided to our providers. It's going to allow us to potentially offer family insurance to our family providers and keep some more people in the workforce. The additional equipment that's necessary to make this transition happen, supplies for a fire rehab unit to support all of the fire districts in this town. Our total budget this year is about $3 million for reference. With our overtime, we are unfortunately pushing way past that, but you know, with adding an additional unit, and we're gonna be able to cut that overtime and make it more sustainable. So for comparison, This would push us up for 2026, based on budget increases, would push us up towards like 4.5 for a total operating budget for the year. This budget represents a shortfall in what's necessary to add these services. There's not a single service on here that I can add without this funding. And I can't like piecemeal it. I can't add another 24-hour unit without adding another fly car. Anybody here who supervises people, you do not want 4 EMS providers in your station 24 hours a day riding bicycles inside without a supervisor there to watch them. I promise you that. But the great news about $1.3 million is that this budget shortfall is going to create a 52.9% increase in service for the town. So that is just like straight number of hours that we're adding to our schedule, not the effects of the fire rehab for our fire services, not the effects for our providers, nothing like that, but just straight numbers, it's 52.9% increase in service. So I am almost done, I promise you, I have like a page and a half left. The increase in services that we're talking about here, it's the additional funds will allow us to improve community engagement, continue to be community-based providers, to continue to contribute to your town, your neighborhood cleanups and things like that. It's going to afford us that ability in that time. It's going to give us equity in our emergency response by decreasing the drops calls and decreasing our turnout times that we talked about earlier. It's the additional 24-hour dedicated unit. There's a little bit of confusion when we talk about this, but this unit wouldn't be available for mutual aid. In other words, the last available unit would need to remain in district to cover in-district calls for our residents. So we're still going to be participating in the mutual aid system, but only when we have multiple ambulances available. We're not going to send our last resource. Right now, I have to send out my last resource because I only get money if I bill medical. I'm not going to turn down any calls because I may not be able to pay my providers if I turn down any calls. So that would be the change there. Rehab services for our firefighters, we would only provide mutual aid for fire rehab to districts that have fire rehab and could provide that to our district. That's the only time that we would provide mutual aid for fire rehab. It also includes top-of-line medical equipment like automatic CPR devices, which enable more consistent care to those who need it most. By providing for these dedicated units, we hope to create a new status quo in our community. As the demands increase, and our call volume continues to increase, the billing revenue will allow for those units to fund for themselves. So in other words, what I'm trying to say here is that this 1.3 is always going to pay for the unit that is ethically responsible to give to this community, but doesn't fiscally provide for itself. So at the point in which this unit, this extra unit that we're talking about, the billing revenue provides for the staffing, the equipment on this unit, it's just going to become another regular unit. And that's going to allow us to add another unit that is, morally responsible, but doesn't provide for itself in billing. And it's just going to keep doing that. So I don't expect to be back up here next year saying, hey, I know it was 1.3 last year, but I need X, Y, Z, right? Because what I'm trying to do is increase our capital budget based on any billing revenue I bring in, which means I'm not going to add extra units just to make the town pay for them because it's not going to give me anything, because I'm only able to add to my capital budget from billing revenue. So I have no gain in coming back up here and just asking for more money for more units next year. And so I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't think that we're going to have some kind of astronomical increase in ask. I think it's also important to know that if the town decides to set aside this funding, it's not guaranteed that every penny of that funding will go to the RFP winner, which this case is us. So on that slide, we saw a $50,000 contribution towards a vehicle fund. The town could hold on to that. And every year hold on to the $50,000 and keep holding on to it. And then when I need a new ambulance, go to the town and say, hey guys, here's a new ambulance I need. Here's the specs. Here's how much it costs. And that's when I could get that, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that every penny of that 1.3 is going to flow directly to our agency or the other RFP winner at that moment in time. So the town could hold on to funds, but those funds are earmarked for EMS and have to be used for EMS in our community. So while this is the end of my presentation, it's not the end of our desire to educate the community and be a part of the solution moving forward. I'd love to sit here and talk about all the things my providers deserve, the depths of the conditions that they work under to serve this community, but that's honestly a conversation for another day. Today is about ensuring that the residents of this community have the service they deserve, not an ambulance agency that has to make decisions solely based on the need to financially break even, which is where we're currently at. Ethically and morally, we have an obligation to serve our community, and we can't serve the community at the level in which it deserves without making sure we recoup our costs. So by removing the barriers of a solely fee-for-service environment, that'll allow us to not only meet the community growth where it's at, but ensure the community is met with the highest levels of care and state-of-the-art equipment that increases positive health outcomes. I hope this has given you some perspective as to why we're here today. I hope that you understand that the community has to ensure adequate services exist for town residents. If the town's not able to set aside funds in any capacity, this agency is no longer going to be able to provide this support to the community. Without being dramatic, we are not going to be able to provide this service in 2026 and beyond. Our agency cannot keep up with the demand and will begin to significantly decline our ability to answer 911 calls. It is everything we can do to hold on to next year at this point. I don't know about Josh, but I don't have that many overnights left in me if I got to process payroll the next morning. We cannot continue to meet this demand. So when other municipalities find out that are funding their agencies find out that, we're not responding to calls, they're more needed in our district, they're not going to continue to participate in our mutual aid system. If we're not covering 30% of our calls, they're not going to come support that. Their taxpayers are not in for supporting 30% of the town of Walk Hill's volume. So ultimately, that's going to mean that 911 calls either go unanswered or have extremely extended wait times, neither of which is acceptable. The time to make a decision is not after this agency's burned to the ground. Because the cost of rebuilding an EMS system in this town isn't going to be $1.3 million at that point, but more expensive than the cost of rebuilding is going to be the cost of rebuilding the trust of this community that we're going to lose if we let that extreme circumstance happen. I welcome any questions and concerns, and I hope that you leave here feeling tonight like you've learned something. I know we all lead really busy lives, and I know I talk a lot, but I really appreciate you guys all being here tonight.
Great job, great job. Now we open it up, whoever wants to come.
We have someone on.
Whoever wants to come to the mic, state your name. We'll start with the audience. Okay.
Good evening, board. Good evening, board. Justin Reed, 46 Western Avenue. Just want to start by saying, Alex, what a phenomenal presentation. I know you worked on it. I don't know where you found the time covering all those calls and putting that presentation together. That data was phenomenal. Obviously, a lot of support. Thank you to everyone for showing up tonight. I think we understand that the value of EMS is not an essential service by New York State's guidelines. But I think in the town of Walk Hill, we need to make a decision to make an essential service here. 1.3 million. I think we all in this room agree that we need to fund this today, not in January, today. I'm not an EMS person. I'm not a first responder. I'm a financial guy by trade. Some of that lingo, thank you for breaking it down for me. I'm not sure how we got here tonight, though. I've been around for the last 7 months. I've met Alex softly throughout the meetings. I've yet to see this topic on those town board meetings for the last 7 months. This seems like a pretty important topic and one that we've missed. We focused on food truck applications, Touch a Truck, and some of those other events, which are all awesome, but this seems like an essential service. I'm not sure if a special district is the right path to fund this, but I am 100% behind funding this as a taxpayer and a resident of the town of Walk Hill. Has the board done their research to understand if this makes the most sense? Have we benchmarked against other municipalities locally? It seems like Alex has. We understand the EMS side of the conversation. I'd like to understand some of the special tax district side of the conversation. In closing, I think we need to pass a budget amendment resolution. Start funding this July 1. Why do we have to wait? Let's update the budget. Let's get out of the golf course management business that loses money every year. Let's take those funds and put it towards the EMS. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience?
My name is Kristen Edelson. I'm the chief of Goshen EMS. I see Wendy and Steve on the Zoom there. What you don't know about me is prior to being the chief of Goshen, I worked 11 years full-time for Town of Walk Hill. My heart is in Town of Walk Hill just as much as it is in Goshen. As Alex said, we are very happy to come out in the middle of the night. My crews are really excited to get halfway to Walk Hill and get canceled when her crews are able to clear from there. But what you also may not know about Goshen is we just became a tax district ourselves. I encourage you to reach out to our board, our town board, and what they have come up with and the decisions that they have made and the reasons that they have decided to fund us in Goshen. We start our funding as of January 1, but it was just approved 2 months ago. So I encourage you to reach out if you have any questions to our board as well.
Thank you.
Good evening, Brian Williams. I'm the chief for Town of Newburgh Emergency Medical Services, as well as one of the deputy EMS coordinators for Orange County. So just to speak on the tax district side, Town of Newburgh went through the same process 2 years ago, as did Town of Montgomery, Town of Wawayanda. The tax district provides dedicated funding where, you could have a change in your board next year and the board could say, well, you know what, EMS isn't as important as we thought it was. The tax district provides the dedicated funding to make sure that EMS is going to remain funded, whether or not the 5 gentlemen up here stay, you guys decide to move on to something else, the tax district is going to remain in service for the EMS to come. So I've worked very closely with Alexandria, the members of Town of Walk Hill EMS. They're a great service here. And I can tell you on behalf of the county, we have nobody else that's going to handle 7,500 additional calls. None of your neighboring partners will be able to handle that. If this service goes away, I'm genuinely not sure where we would go from there. So this is not a want, this is a need at this point. And honestly, I agree, the sooner we can get funding in place, the better. So wish you guys the best of luck in this. And if you have questions, please reach out to the other municipalities. They're more than happy to discuss why they chose the tax district option, why it made most sense.
Thank you. Anyone on Zoom? No? Anyone in the audience?
Good evening, everyone. Lou Gracia. I've spent a lifetime in service to this community, been a fireman for the past 43 years, joined when I was 16 years old. I'm a pretty simple guy. At the end of the day, what we're looking at here, I guess the first question would be, has anybody in this room ever called 911 for an ambulance? And you go off of the traditional clock, like we have in the back room, and you go on to, this is the most important thing in my life clock. Whether it's a family member, God forbid, whether it's someone in the community, a car accident you come upon, things like that. In the fire world, we call it the fire clock. When those times are carrying on for resound, for mutual aid, things like that, 3 minutes seems like 3 hours. As a past fire chief, twice over, when you're standing at a residence or you're on the way to a call and you're waiting for your truck or an ambulance to show up, 3 minutes seems like 3 hours. I've literally have lived through, as an adult, every facet of TOVAC since I joined the town as a first responder and then ultimately an employee for over 39 years. And at the end of the day, what sums this up very simply is 32 cents. 32 cents per day to fund the Town of Walk Hill ambulance, to allow these folks to do the miracle work that they do. We've lived through peaks and valleys of all emergency services in the town. We all face our own struggles. We all face our own troubles. But at the end of the day, TOVAC, I'm an old guy. I still refer to them as TOVAC. I see Wendy and Steve on the TV there. That acronym will just never get out of our mind, but you know who you are. We know who you are. But at the end of the day, I lobby for New York State Fire Districts. I was up there in March lobbying. One of the prime things that the Fire Districts Association of New York State is lobbying for right now is EMS as an essential service. Just due to the fact that there are many fire districts that provide EMS. There used to be several fire companies in Orange County that used to do it, but they just can't do it on a volunteer basis anymore. We also lobby for full payment and full reimbursement. Whereas there are some insurance companies, I call 911, they're gonna do reasonable and customary, it comes out to $200, they mail me the check. So what? I don't have to mail the check to the Town of Walkville Emergency Services. They're gonna ask me to mail it, but I'm not going to. So one of the things we're lobbying for is direct reimbursement as well. And it all dovetails together. We're all on the same team. We all fight the same battles, but at the end of the day, we all provide the same service. There's 7 fire districts in this town. The fire districts have the benefit of a designated tax district, a different command structure, individual political subdivision under the rules of the state of New York. So quote unquote, we can kind of do what we want. When it comes time to borrow money, we have to go to the public, and typically the public supports us. The town board, by creating an ambulance district, just like the other communities have done since the gentleman Newberg talked about in Goshen, the lady from Goshen. The town board has the ability to do this. The town board has the ability to put out this RFP. For Alex to go out on a limb, literally, and put all of that information out. She just wrote your RFP. She just gave all of the other competitors the numbers on the RFP. But at the end of the day, this town would do a complete disservice. Number one, not to go forward with this ambulance district. Number two, not to entertain the RFP the town of Walkville is going to be putting out there, just based on the fact of experience, response, things like that. There are ways that you can do that. And again, 32 cents per day. And again, I've called 911. I've had 911 come to my house. When you're waiting for an ambulance, the most trivial thing in the world to somebody else is the most important thing to you at that point in time. I agree with Mr. Reed. I think we should fund this immediately. I have a little bit of experience in the town. I know that, some budgeting and things like that. I've done that a little bit. I know there's certainly some monies out there that can be transferred or things like that to get this done. Break it down to whatever the 6-month or 7-month period may be. It's going to be less than $1.3 million for that. But I would recommend, again, as a first responder in this town, as a supporter of Town of Walkville Emergency Services, I would recommend you draft the RSP as soon as possible. I recommend you pass a resolution as soon as possible to get that done at your next town board meeting. I would put a 30-day limit on submittals for that. They don't need anything more than that. And like we said, by July 1st, we could hit the ground running here with Town of Walkville Emergency Services, and we got your back. We really do. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone on Zoom? Anyone in the audience?
I'll speak a little bit when everybody else is done.
Okay. Anyone else in the audience?
All right, Joe Andre, Town of Walkville. Again, I've had the pleasure of working with Alex and Josh on many events that we've done here in the town that they've supported. At the end of the day, they were the refreshing faces that kind of restored our faith in EMS. Mobile Life was a great community partner, did a lot of stuff at their cost for us for many, many years. With that being said, they kind of picked up where Mobile Life left off when Empress took them over. With that being said, they have a huge investment to the community. And if we don't do what we have to do to keep this alive, you lose that community investment that they've made. We can contract out with any commercial provider in the world. You're not going to get the level of service that you're getting from these two and their people standing back there. So with that being said, whatever we have to do, we need to do, because you look at the municipalities around, that don't have their community EMS agencies and they're contracting out commercial services, you get what you get. When whatever you pay for is gone, too bad, you know, and that's not what we're getting here. And I think we should really, really push hard to retain what we have, but you're never going to replace that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else in the audience? With that, I will start with our councilman who want to make a statement. Start with Councilman Tony.
Sure, so we're here tonight because the board is in support of doing something about this. I'm glad that so many people came out tonight to show the support. Couple of things, I got, some phone calls from some residents, talking about billing and talking about how that would work, thinking that it would work like the fire district where you could just, raise the taxes. I'm glad to learn that the town board, whatever the makeup be in the future, would have the responsibility of overseeing that. This way, someone's held accountable, right? So one thing that I can tell you, I was looking at the numbers that you put up there for the response time in Ward 1 and Ward 4. Hopefully in the future, maybe we can get an ambulance stationed up that way, Ward 1 and 4 kind of Route 17 Bloomingburg Road, splits them. And if we can get an ambulance corps up that way, I think I'll bring those numbers down to be fantastic. But, I'm all in favor of this, and however quickly it goes, 2 weeks, a month, whatever, I don't know. There's, a lot of different ideas up here, so but it's gonna happen. There's no doubt in my mind, so that's all I got.
Thank you. Councilman Wellington.
Hey, again, thank you everyone for coming out and showing your support, and thank you, Alexandra, for a fantastic presentation. It's very informative, and I think the public and we as a board got a lot out of it. Just a couple of things that I want to clarify, and that we've been talking about this for several months. It's true. As a government agency, you just can't jump into something and just say you're going to do this at the expense of the taxpayer. You have to provide the taxpayer what the cost is, and this is a much needed service. Lisa, our town assessor, is in the audience. I want to thank her because she provided the information that we can provide to the residents as to what this is going to cost them. Because great service or not, that's going to be one of the questions that we will constantly be getting from everyone. What is this costing? What is this costing? And this took some time to put together because you have to assess the entire town, size of residents and commercial and so on. And so this is the information that was provided. So thank you, Lisa, and your department for doing that. The other thing is that the steps that needed to be taken, and Brian is back there in the room, and he spoke, and we met with the county EMS. We weren't just listening to Wednesday meetings and talking about this. We were doing things behind the scenes. And part of that was talking to the county and talking to the EMS as far as their impact, as far as what we can do for the steps. So this is the closest thing that we're going to get to the next steps that allow us to do this. The RFP is going to be very important because the way the RFP is going to be written will determine who gets that contract. So we have to be very careful with that. Again, you have to do your due diligence, do your homework, take the steps that are needed to do it right, and hopefully be successful at it. So I don't think anyone on this board or anyone in this audience disagrees that this is a much needed and welcome service. And I wish us all good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Brunello.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming in here tonight. I want to start off with saying that we all see this as a necessary, vital ambulance service. Our town has gotten larger. To do it successfully, we must identify and provide the tools needed for our town to succeed and grow. I find myself proud to work with my fellow council members and supervisor in this capacity right now to see that this comes to fruition, that this actually happens. I like the idea of maybe funding ahead of time, so this way there's not as much pressure on them and they can get started what they have to get started, and as the RFP comes in, and if they get accepted for the RFP, they can even go further. There are so many people right now I need to thank for getting this to where we are right now. Starting out with Lisa from planning, I mean, just amazing. Alexander putting this presentation together for the layman to understand it even more. I appreciate it. I do have some questions. I want to approach you, but I'll do that at a later time. And again, thank everybody for coming out and hearing this.
Thank you, Steve. Johnson?
Thank you. Going last, there's not a lot that really hasn't been said. I think you heard the importance of a task district and why it's important to have dedicated care. I know this board is in control of that funding per se. You know, the board changes every 2 years. So that's very important, like other districts have, and why we do that. The cost, you know, you heard Mr. Ingrassia say it's 32 cents a day. If you put that into a month, it's less than $10 a month. That's like 1 Starbucks coffee a month for the cost of this. If you look at your tax bill, you're having like, I think $300 or $300 for the library tax, which is less than half of that. So I mean, you know, what you're getting for this is a lot for your investment, a real lot. If anybody's ever been in a situation when you had to call 911, wait for an ambulance, you know, even now where I am, 8-10 minutes to get there is still very, very fast. So anything what, you know, shorter than that would be certainly better, but you know, you're talking about life or death here for the cost of pennies a day. If you take the 7,500 calls that they do and you divide that by the cost, you know, you're less than 1/100th of a, actually, yeah, less than 1/100th of a cent a day. You know, or per call, 100th of a cent per call, like that's nothing, absolutely nothing. So anybody who thinks this isn't valuable and something that needs to happen, you know, probably has never had to call 911 and wait for an ambulance. You know, I myself recently have had to do a lot with the ambulance service in it's Slate Hill. The Slate Hill ambulance service, that's where my folks live, and my dad's been having some issues, and he's been a frequent flyer on their ambulance service. In fact, you know, we were like bringing dinner to the house because they would come so much. But you know, within literally minutes, you would call and they would be there. So certainly it's a life-saving thing, and until you experience that and the kindness of the people and the friendliness and the helpfulness that they come with, you know, the people are just as important as the service. And this is a great facility from all the staff, you know, Josh and Alex, right down to everybody that works there. They really care about Walk Hill. So, you know, it's certainly something that's very important. I think that, you know, the cost, again, minimal, the need, 100% there. You heard the town is growing, it's bigger, we're 64 square miles. You know, they can get to 64 square miles in 10 minutes and be at your door less, you know, if they're closer. 7,000 plus calls is tremendous in a year. Who would pick that up if they weren't there? It just wouldn't happen. You know, again, we're talking about someone's life here. You know, somebody in this community that recently experienced that, and you know, they're here today because so very quickly they were able to do what they needed to do and get them to Garnet to take care of any serious things that would have went further down the road and been an issue. You know, so this person is here tonight functioning like normal because of this, you know, ambulance service. So I really can't stress enough how important it is. And again, you know, everybody on this board hears it and knows it, and this is why we're here tonight. You know, anything that we have to do has to involve the public because we use public funds. However we spend anything requires public hearings. So, you know, you have a chance to hear what we're spending money on, why we're spending it. So, you know, that's just the process of how this all works. So, you know, I'm certainly 100% report if you can't tell for that, if you can't tell from my comments, and, you know, we'll do whatever we need to make everybody okay with the idea and hopefully move this thing forward as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson. I think we are pretty clear as to what this board feels about this service. I don't think we have a more committed duo than Alexandra and Josh to this community. They've been a great partner to the town. And definitely what Mr. Williams said about the number of calls, it's crazy. I've always say it's good to have and not to need it.
Yes.
Or to need it and not have it. I've always say that because it's important. With that being said, I'm not gonna beat it anymore. I think this board has spoken, community has spoken. I make a motion to keep the public hearing open till May 21st for written comments.
Second.
Supervisor,
Yes,
I do have a couple of procedural things I need to.
okay, go right ahead.
I'm gonna go up there, so that's gonna. Stay here. You deserve to stay here. First of all, good evening, everybody. I'm Will Frank. I'm the town attorney. For someone who's not used to public speaking and was so nervous, I think no one could have done a better job of presenting this data, which is sometimes a little bit overwhelming and confusing, but presented in a way that all of us could understand. So thank you for that. I'm getting to know Alex and Josh coming to our meetings, and I'm sorry, and getting to know Alex and Josh coming to our meetings, their dedication is beyond question. So, and I think the board has recognized that over the last many months. Just want to go over a couple of procedural things on what has to happen, what the options are for the town. Forming a district, not forming a district. I happen to represent the town of Montgomery, where we did do the work to form the ambulance district. And it's working out very well. And briefly, I'll get into that in a minute. But one of the advantages that we do have with the ambulance district in Montgomery, we do have a contract with Walden Ambulance. And they come to the town board meetings quarterly and they give their statistics. They show when things are improving, when things need improvement, and all the successes they're having. And it's very, very informative. And with the working relationship they have with the town board and with the public. And I think that's something that'll more than likely happen here as well. So procedurally, what happens is, should the board pass a resolution and an order adopting a special district, that is subject to what's called permissive referendum. It's not just poof, they passed a resolution and the district is formed the next day. A notice has to be published in the paper, and we have to wait 30 days from the date of the resolution. And if there's no petition objecting to the district, which I can't imagine would happen, but you never know, you have to wait under the statute, under Article 12A of the town law, you have to wait that 30 days. Once that happens, we then file the paperwork, town clerk and I work together, we file the paperwork with the county and also with the New York State Comptroller, and then you have the district. Once the district is formed, there are two options. And we've talked a little bit tonight about the RFP and what would happen. The first option is the town actually staffs its own district, buys the vehicles and the equipment and the medical supplies, and it's simply not practical. Because the town doesn't want to be in the ambulance service business. It's just, it simply wouldn't work budgetarily or anything else. So what would happen is we would put out an RFP, and Alex is correct. There is the possibility that once you put out the RFP, you'll maybe have multiple bids. But what the town has, and a lot of people, you know, they don't see it in the bidding process, the town has a law that's called the best value pricing law. So let's say hypothetically, someone is a higher bidder and they want more money to do something. And we can establish criteria in the RFP, which stands for request for proposals, and we can set out what this town needs. And that'll be up to the board, what kind of criteria they want to put in, considering the report we heard tonight. And as Lou said, a lot of our RFP is already on the way to be, you know, edited and published in pretty good shape. So we get those proposals back. And then another advantage to formation of a district, other than the fact that we may be eligible for some grant funding down the road as a separate district, especially if mutual aid is involved. There will be a contract. There'll be a contract between the town district, and these guys being, or whoever's sitting in these chairs, being the quote unquote commissioners, will have a contract with the winning bidder. That does not necessarily have to be just a one-year contract. It can be a two-year contract, in some circumstances, slightly longer than that. We can set up the pricing, who's getting paid, if there's gonna be some sort of increase from year to year, or that can always be renegotiated. But that's another advantage to having the district and contracting rather than the town actually staffing the district itself. So the best value law is going to be very important when it comes to that, when considering who this town needs to provide the service. As far as whether something can be done prior to the formation of the district, that's something we can talk to the board about. Town Law 122B allows for a direct contract without a district, a contract for a period of time with an ambulance service or multiple ambulance services. So that's something we've touched on a little bit in our board meetings and work sessions, but that's something we can also talk about as this process goes forward. So those are the things I just want to make clear to everybody how the process works. The other thing is, this has been going on for a while. The first thing that has to happen, and did happen back in January, the board allocated funds to do what's necessary under the statute to have what's called a map, plan, and report created. This is done by an engineering firm, and it includes a map of the entire town, and they did the financial analysis working with our assessor, Lisa Laspinar, because it's necessary to take into account all the properties within the town. The engineers have to do that. They have to put this report together, and it's not an overnight situation. It took a couple of months to do. We got the report, and we moved forward with scheduling this public hearing this evening. So all of these steps have been taken. It's been going on for several months in consultation with Alex and her team for the things that we needed, and with Lisa in the assessor's office and her team and our engineers. If anyone needs a copy of this report and wants to take a look at it, we have copies available at in the clerk's office. It's online. You can have my copy if somebody wants one tonight. Got one here, you're welcome to it. Have it. And those are the things. Want to make everyone aware of what's happening, where we go next from here. And if anybody has any other questions for Alex, I'm now going to sit down, but I wanted to make sure everybody understood the procedures and where we're going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Will. I was gonna speak on MHE, who actually did the report for us, and here today is Kelly, who's from MHE, if anyone had any questions regarding this report. So it has been ongoing, I have personally spoken to other supervisors in other towns who have these districts and have, EMS in there. With that being said, I make a motion again to keep the public hearing open for public comments until May 21st.
And close it thereafter.
And close it thereafter. Second by Mr. Johnson. All in favor?